Hello there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and thank you for all you guys who came back after my last video where I reviewed the third episode of the Acolyte. I haven't gotten that much hate since I rooted for the Space Marines against the aliens in Avatar. I mean, the hatred there was more justified, honestly. I said some really out-of-pocket stuff. But yeah, as my football coach used to tell me, Alan, you're a fucking idiot. The rest I don't remember because repeated blows to my head. But let's look to the future. I'll pour a glass, a cup, to all the subs who have left. No hatred, no anger. I don't want enemies. And more importantly, to those of you who disagree with me and still stayed, you guys are the champs. I love you guys. You're the type of people I would fight in a bar and then have a great conversation with after and become like lifelong friends with because of that baseline chillness I hope we share. Alright, anyway, one of the biggest criticisms levied against episode 3 of The Acolyte, spoiler alert, is that Osha and Mae's creation is lore-breaking. And no, it's not because they have two mothers. It's because of this heated conversation between Mother Coral and Mother Anastasia. Anastasia.
I carried them. I created them.
I imagine if I were in the room, I'd be like, damn, and then damn, because like they just one-upped each other in very, very quick succession. I mean, there's something clearly a little off with their relationship. They need to work on this. But yeah, like carrying any living being inside of you is really no easy task. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. I once didn't make a poop for like 4 days, and I literally called the emergency room crying because I thought I was going to die. I thought the delivery of said poop would kill me. Carrying two living things inside of you for whatever the gestation period is for an artificially inseminated human inside of a Zabrak woman takes is twice as difficult. But then Mama Anastasia says, I created life, and I'm guessing she doesn't mean she artificially inseminated Coral, with some male slaves that they have tied on the backside of that mountain fortress. So how did Mama Anastasia actually make the twins? Well, this next line from Mother Coral, which honestly is a great name for a Zabrak of her skin color and like with the horns and stuff. She literally looks like the, never mind, just play the clip.
And what happens if the Jedi discover how you created them?
So this immediately makes me think that Osha and Mae were created using the Force, which is, of course, in the High Republic era, completely policed by the Jedi, and not like, the Cosmic Force. Some people have pointed out that Anakin Skywalker is supposed to be the only person created directly by the Force. His mom says the following in the Phantom Menace.
There was no father. I carried him, I gave birth, I raised him. I can't explain what happened.
It's either that or Qui-Gon Jinn secretly, taken her 10 years ago and used the recent Naboo incident to travel back and visit his little creation. Okay, I'm just trolling a little bit. But yeah, if we are to believe that Anakin was born without a father, this probably indicates that he is a being created from the Force itself. There's actually a comic in Star Wars in which Vader has this vision of Palpatine messing with his mom's womb, when he was still in it, which is just next level sketchy kind of stuff for Palpatine. Add that on a list of why Palpatine's like the worst human being in existence. Now, I don't know if this means that Palpatine is the one who created Anakin. I don't think that's what it is. I think it's more likely that he messed around with Anakin's neurons in his head and, made him more passionate and emotional and therefore easier to manipulate. I'm pretty sure Snoke did the same thing that Kylo Ren in a comic as well, or something like that. Anyway, Anakin's conception is anything but natural, and more importantly, people directly connect his creation to the Chosen One prophecy, where he's supposed to bring balance to the Force, and so it makes sense here that the Cosmic Force would just create Anakin out of thin air. There's really no other explanation. And so this idea of Mae and Osha being created by the Force seems like a big FU to the Chosen One prophecy and the original concept of Anakin's Immaculate Conception. Actually, once a Catholic viewer did comment in a really polite and nice way that Immaculate Conception only refers to the birth of Jesus Christ. So let's just call it Anakin's similar to Immaculate Conception, but not the actual Immaculate Conception. But to be honest, I think people who are saying that Mae and Osha's birth breaks the Chosen One prophecy are being a bit disingenuous. I think they're nitpicking a little bit, or more importantly, I feel like I actually don't feel like fans who comment about this problem actually came up with this idea themselves. I wouldn't be surprised if there were like one or two creators just funneling these kind of ideas, and that idea spreads like contagion, right? It's usually these channels that are, all based on hatred and fear of everything in pop culture. They usually have like thumbnails with big words on them. It's not even a creative thumbnail, if I'm being honest. On top of, just having lazy thumbnail designs, I feel like a lot of these creators don't actually understand the lore too much. And I hate to be one of those guys who are like, you don't understand the lore, but like, again, this seems disingenuous. It seems like they're just trying to rage bait, right? Rage bait. But yeah, Mae and Osha's thing here doesn't break the lore at all. If anything, it strengthens and brings back some really interesting EU lore concepts. Here's the thing, Mae and Osha were not created by the cosmic force. And if that were the case, then Mother Coral wouldn't be talking about the Jedi finding out, because they would be totally cool with that. Just like with what happened with Anakin, being born without a father. Because remember, the whole idea behind the Jedi is they really fear what happens if they manipulate the force too much, if they become too powerful. And so their approach, their dogma about the Force is to be as hands-off as possible and kind of just be passive observers of what the Force does and what it wants them to do. And this is why the Jedi also control the galaxy's supply of kyber crystals, including any newly discovered mines, so that research companies can't just build super weapons out of these crystals or, make, clean energy reactors. That's actually what Galen Erso thought he was doing when he was building the super laser for the Death Star. But yeah, one of the big draws for Galen Erso to work on Director Krennic's little project was because the guy was fascinated about kyber crystals, but couldn't get his hands on them until the Empire killed all of the Jedi, therefore lifting their control of all the kyber crystals. And that's why the Jedi were problematic. They had their own fear about manipulating the Force, but they also didn't let other people manipulate the Force. And so even if Galen Erso came to them with a, genuinely good idea to use kyber crystals to create clean energy, they probably would have rejected it. The Jedi also had a lot of ancient tomes and holocrons with tons of ancient Force practices under lock and key in the Forbidden Dark Arts section in the Jedi Temple Library. So yeah, the Jedi were always really hands-off about the Force. Even if they had a lot of knowledge, locked up in their archives, they never really looked into things deeply, like how does the Force work at a molecular level? Surely you'd want to find out why these magical powers and how work and how they function, right? And so while the Jedi would never question the will of the cosmic force if it created life, if some crazy witches were just creating human beings using the Force, well, that would definitely cause a stir. It would also cause the Jedi to send their enforcers to shut down the program. It's like that time that mad scientist in China tried to CRISPR a baby. And more importantly, these witches creating life in the Force itself is not only not against the lore or lore breaking, this idea can actually trace its roots to some of my favorite Legends materials in the Darth Plagueis novel. The Darth Plagueis novel, which is now Legends, is a spectacular book that covers the rise of Darth Plagueis, the master of Darth Sidious. We find out that in his early life, he basically used his connections to the financial industry to create a huge lobbying group, which would basically soak up all sorts of companies, kind of non-government organizations, political factions. They basically used credits to buy off the entire galaxy. Plagueis was an extremely wise Sith puppeteer who understood that if you controlled the economy and had a lot of credits, you controlled the entire political order and thus the galaxy. See, Palpatine gets a lot of credit for executing Order 66 and basically completing a perfect run until the Empire was raised from the ashes of the Republic. But in a lot of ways, Palpatine was Tom Brady to Darth Plagueis' Bill Belichick. I don't care how terrible the Pats last few years were. Cam Newton was just garbage and Mac Jones wasn't that much better. Bill Belichick was a hell of a coach, at least during the Tom Brady time period. And I don't think Tom Brady would have become as good of a quarterback as he did without him. This might also be really confusing for, any of you football fans who are used to that Belichick-Palpatine meme. He's Plagueis in this allegory. Metaphor symbology. Anyway, Darth Plagueis, once he got the ball rolling with the grand plan to destroy the Jedi, started focusing on other things, especially after a failed assassination attempt at his annual gathering of evil, shadowy figures. It's at this point that Darth Plagueis began obsessing with immortality, like all Sith and rich people over the age of 50. He began to experiment with various techniques to keep his body from dying, and he was actually quite successful. During this time, he would actually write a scientific journal called The Science of Creating Life, where he would document all of his various crazy experiments, which included many ancient Force alchemy techniques and also a look into the relationship between the Force and biology. Fascinating stuff, really. Plagueis came to understand that the midichlorians were kind of like a web that held together all living things. The midichlorians were also an organism themselves that could be communicated with. And so if Plagueis could enforce his will on the midichlorians, he could convince them to control cells. At one point, he was able to force the midichlorians to clump cells together and form living things. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a Sith doctor, I'm probably butchering this explanation somewhat, but this is a technique that dates back all the way to the ancient Jedi, which is also Legends. There's this one Jedi Ranger, if I recall correctly, who took a blaster wound to her stomach from her brother, and like she ended up using some like flesh that she animated into more flesh, and she like literally put it in the hole in her stomach. I mean, it's some raunchy stuff, but that's how the Force used to be. And it's definitely not kosher with the modern Jedi Order. Anyway, this scientific journal had all sorts of crazy content in it. I mean, Darth Plagueis just really went off the deep end in a very spectacular way. I mean, there are chapters labeled Transcending Death, the Netherworld and Chaos, Sith Spirits, and of course the Prophecy of the Chosen One. But anyway, at one point, Darth Plagueis' meddling with the Force eventually drew the ire of the Cosmic Force. Around the year 42 BBY, Plagueis took a former apprentice known as Venomous and reanimated him and killed him several times. And this was a great victory for Darth Plagueis. He achieved what he set out to achieve, which is immortality, and this was really his way of ending the Rule of Two era. He wanted it to be just him and Darth Sidious forever. It's actually like really romantic. Sith bros for life. Yeah. The idea was the two would basically keep each other alive with this technique. Little did Plagueis understand just how much of a psychopath Palpatine was. Anyway, after this victory, to celebrate, Palpatine and Darth Plagueis would sit down and meditate together, and they would actually try to pour malicious ideas into the larger living force, and basically they reached out to as many midichlorians as they could and tried to create life through this technique. It's said that this experiment failed to yield any results, and to make matters worse, Darth Plagueis' perception of the Force became silent afterwards. And soon, many of the lives he created, these Force experiments with plants and animals, all started dying. And so Darth Plagueis, to his dying day, believed that the Force turned against him and basically cut him off. It's a crazy story, but it's really the closest we can get to understanding how Mae and Osha were created, and it makes sense that this creation happened in the womb of Zabrak. They are notoriously tough and have backup organs, including hearts. It also makes sense that Mother Anase would create, or at least fertilize, an egg. I guess that's what happened in this case, instead of making an entire human being. Whatever her knowledge of the Force and biology is, I don't know if she has similar techniques to Darth Plagueis. It's definitely going to be easier to fertilize an egg rather than to create that entire human being. Interesting side note, in real life, with artificial insemination, you're much more likely to get twins. So I thought that was kind of cool, because this is like Force artificial insemination. Also, I have to point out that the gigantic machines that seem to have electricity coming out of them in the Witch's Fortress, those machines remind me a lot of the machines that are described in Darth Plagueis' books, which are actually very similar to Frankenstein's machines, which he used to also create life with. Which is why, once again, if you are going to do something crazy like this and shoot electricity into a sentient being, it might as well be a Zabrak, because built tough, Anyway, this is my take on the lore here with Mae and Osha. Their creation doesn't go against the Chosen One prophecy. If anything, it helps build on the background lore of that Chosen prophecy. Because in many ways, the Chosen One, the creation of Anakin, was seen as the Force's reaction to the rising power of the Sith and Plagueis' attempt to create life. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. We'll be talking a lot more about the Acolytes. We kind of brushed through what happened at the end of the third episode. I didn't really want to talk about it because I'm really tired. I made 2 videos a day. I do all my own writing, and I do some of the editing. Congo does the other editing, but yeah, I'm just really tired. But I want to sit down with fresh eyes and take a look at why the end, why that fire was so disjointed. I have some interesting theories that I want to share with you guys. Anyway, I'll see you next time. My name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. See you next time.